Hi guys, I'm going to show you some watercolor techniques that you can apply to your portrait project, or if you're working on a different project, you can apply to that. First up, one important thing is to always choose colors to put side by side that are analogous. So we just covered analogous in our bell ringer, but analogous colors are colors next to each other on the color wheel. So I have ready for myself some red and yellow. I didn't have any orange paint, so I'm going to make orange. And then on this side I have cool colors, green, blue, and violet. So you might notice that my paint is a little bit different than yours. My paint is the liquid form. I'm at home, so this is what I had at home, but it behaves the same. Yours is just dried out, but the great thing about watercolor is it dries out and you just make it wet again with some water. Every kind of art material is just pigments of some sort mixed with a binder. So with watercolor, the binder is kind of weak and it allows it to move around with a puddle of water. So watercolor is all about controlling the flow of paint, which sometimes can be trouble, right? Sometimes it's a little bit hard to do. Notice I'm washing my brush in between colors because I want to try to keep these clean. I'm making little puddles of paint and mixed with water, so I can dip my paintbrush into those puddles. You can do the same thing. You're just going to be rubbing the dry cakes instead of rubbing, the tube paint like I have. Okay, so I'm going to first take my red, paint a little bit. I'm going to take my yellow, and I'm hoping to get some orange in between, but I want you to watch what happens when I paint over here. Let me make sure this is on screen. Yep. When I paint over here, the yellow stays where I want it. But as I get closer to the red, when I touch it, you can see that the paint starts to mix. And it mixes really fast because it's flowing with the water. The more water there is, the more it's going to mix. So I am tempted to move this around and add more water, but I know what's going to happen. This whole thing will turn orange if I do that. I have to manage how much water I have on there. So if you're finding everything's just kind of all mixing together, you need to use less water. If you're finding that when you paint with the watercolor, it's looking really streaky and dry, you need to use a little more water. Okay, so you always want to keep with analogous colors because of that mixing. If I take red and a color that's far away on the color wheel and put them side by side while they're still wet. Okay, so here's my green, here's my red. If I go side by side, they start to mix. What color do I get? Pretty nasty, right? So stick to analogous colors next to each other, or you can let it dry in between colors. If we have a hair dryer in the room, I know I do at Odal, you can dry it if you want to put a color next to a color that is on the opposite side of the color wheel. Otherwise, if we don't have a hair dryer, you have to be really careful what you put next to each other or let it dry overnight before you put the color next to it. So I'm going to do my analogous colors on the cool side of the spectrum. I've got my green. I'm going to blend that into my blue. And then my violet. So try to do this, try to get them to blend without just making a big puddle of one color. And as I see, I had a little too much water here. I'm losing my purple. So I'm going to do my purple again over here. Let it touch. So I should be If I'm using too much water, one way to help with that is have a little paper towel and just dry off your brush in between and just pick up how much water you need off of your puddle. So I had a brush that was wet because I washed it. Then I put it in my puddle of water, and that's just way too much water. So I just want my puddle amount of water. I don't want a really, really wet brush plus my puddle of water. That's like 5 times the water. Okay, so try to mix analogous colors. And you can see here, yep, I had too much water. Look at that big. It's just moving where it wants to go. If you don't mind that, since we're doing such a abstract artwork right now, then that's fine. Just be careful if the colors are not analogous, because when it does that, you'll get brown or gray, and you don't want that. Now I have some fun stuff over here to try out with my watercolor. I have salt, I have rubbing alcohol, I have cling wrap, and some minute rice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take some paint and while it is still wet, all of these techniques need a puddle of paint to work. Okay, and it needs to be pretty bright for it to work too. First one is the classic salt. Miss Caulfield forgot to open the package before she started. I hope you can't see me because I am a wreck trying to open this thing. There we go. Okay, so while it's still wet, while there's still a puddle, I'm going to drop some salt on it. Now, salt reacts with water. Watercolor is all about the water. And you can see right away that what happens is the salt is kind of sucking up some of the water. And while it's sucking up the water, it's also sucking up some of the pigment. And it's leaving this halo around the salt pieces. Okay, so next one is rice. Let me do blue for that one. Woo, that's really bright, huh? I need a little more water with that. Yeah, more you rub it on that paint, the brighter that color is going to be. So this is minute rice. Anything that absorbs water is going to do some cool effects. This one's going to be hard to see until it's dry, so you can look at this in class. I'll have it dry for you to look at. What's going to happen is it's going to do the same kind of halo thing, but it's going to leave a little line, a little texture of a line, which is pretty cool. Okay, last but not least. Oh, no, not last. I have 2 more. Okay, so I'm going to do green this time. Okay, this next one is rubbing alcohol. I'm taking a Q-tip. I'm going to stick it in the bottle of rubbing alcohol, and I'm just going to touch it, and you get these cool polka dots. And sometimes it'll even give you kind of like a bullseye effect, which is cool. And I honestly don't know what scientifically is happening there. If somebody would like to ask a science teacher, I would totally love that, because it makes these cool, almost like rock agate looking things happen. I don't know what's going on there. All right, now last but not least, the last one is cling wrap, or saran wrap, or plastic wrap, whatever you want to call it. I am going to use red for this last one. I'm not going to use yellow because the lighter the color, the less you're going to see the effect. And yellow is so close to the white of the paper. If I use it for this, you're not going to see it. But what I can do is I can kind of mix colors, add a little spots of yellow in the red. Okay, while it's still wet, like I said, that's a theme. All these things down here have to be wet when you do this. I'm going to take my cling wrap and I'm going to set it on it. And you can see it's starting to stick to the paint. Wherever it sticks is going to be a shape left on there. Around that shape will be a dark line. Wherever it is not touching wherever the saran wrap is not touching the paint, these little air pockets, those are going to be lighter. Okay, you have to leave the saran wrap there to dry. So don't touch it after you squish it on there. Put it on the drying rack with the saran wrap. Okay, Well, I'm excited for you to see what this turns out like after it dries because it's going to look different. So tomorrow I'll show you what it looks like all dry. Thanks for watching.